Okay, let's talk about how blood moves through the body. Okay, so it starts in the body, right? Then it makes its way back up to the right atrium and then to the right ventricle. Okay, we should say here that at the right ventricle it's full of CO2, right, which is a waste product. Okay, and then from there it's going to get pumped up into the lungs. Okay, and then from the lungs it moves back down to the left side of the heart, to the left atrium, and then to the left ventricle. Okay, by this time it's going to be filled with oxygen, which is energy. Okay, and then that energetic blood is going to be pumped back out into the body. Okay, so this is how blood is moving through the body. Let's say we have a problem right here. All right, so our left ventricle is not working so good. We have some heart failure in the left ventricle, so this pump is not working as well as it could be. So we're going to have problems downstream from the left ventricle problem and upstream. Okay, let's talk about the downstream problem for a second. All right, so if we go here, say this is downstream. Okay, so what's going on? Well, downstream we're not getting as much blood as we used to be able to get because this left ventricle is not working as well. If we're not getting enough blood, right, which we could represent as a little small arrow, we're not getting enough O2. If we're not getting enough O2, we're not getting enough energy. If we're not getting enough energy, we're going to feel fatigue. Okay, so this is a big symptom in patients who are suffering from heart failure. All right, so that's the downstream set of problems. Let's talk about upstream. Okay, here's upstream. Okay, so the biggest problem here is congestion. Okay, so congestion occurs because this pump is not pumping out enough blood. So that means that we're going to get a little bit of blood moving back. It's going to cause backup all the way back through all these systems. Okay, so we're going to talk about congestion mainly in the lungs and in the body. All right, so let me introduce you to someone. Okay, this is our buddy here. He's going to help us illustrate this. So I drew him a little wide around the center here so that he could give us a little bit more room to work. Okay, so here's the heart. Right, we're going to break up the heart into 4 chambers. Okay, and we're saying we have a problem right here in the left ventricle. Okay, so let's talk about the problems that go on with the lungs. So let's give ourselves a little lung, a little lobe here. Okay, we said we have blood that's going from the right ventricle into the lung. It has a bunch of CO2 in it, and then it's returning with a lot of oxygen to the left atrium, and then it's getting pumped out into the body. All right, so let's look at a little portion of the lung here, and let's really explore what's going on. Okay. All right. Okay. So let's talk about the functional part of the lung. Okay, this is this little part. Kind of looks like a cul-de-sac. Okay, it's called the alveoli. Okay, and the alveoli is where gas exchange happens. Okay, it's where CO2 leaves the body and where O2 gets into the body. So this alveoli is surrounded by little capillaries, these really thin little blood vessels, and we're going to represent it one in one color and one in the other because this is where CO2 is actually leaving the body. Okay, this is CO2. And it leaves and goes out, and then we have O2 coming in. Okay, right, so this is where this whole thing happens. Now let's say we have congestion, right? We're talking about left ventricle heart failure. We have congestion backed up into the lungs. What does that look like? Well, if you've ever squeezed a water hose, right, what happens? In that area behind the water hose, or sorry, behind your hand, the water hose starts swelling up, right? So it starts filling up with fluid. Okay, and let's change colors here. You start getting all this fluid back up, okay? So if you get enough fluid back up, you're going to have some of that fluid move into the alveoli, right? And what happens is that fluid disrupts the gas exchange, right? It just gets in the way, right? It's hard to get gas through this liquid. Okay, so if you're not getting enough oxygen into your lungs, which means you're not getting enough oxygen into your body, you're going to experience shortness of breath. Okay, this is another major symptom of heart failure. All right, let's talk about some other breathing related symptoms. So one is called paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. Okay, it's kind of an interesting word. Okay, so basically this means that at night your central nervous system tells your heart and your lungs, hey guys, relax. We're not building cabinets or anything. We're just sleeping. We're not using that much energy. So it encourages the heart to quit pumping as hard. Well, when someone has heart failure, they need their heart to be working as hard as it can all of the time. So when the heart slows down at night, you get this congestion, so people wake up in the middle of the night short of breath and coughing. Okay, so that's paroxysmal nocturnal dyspnea. Okay, this symptom is called orthopnea. Now for this, I want you to remember that gravity always works in the downward direction. Okay, so why is this important to us? So say we have a vein that's carrying blood from the legs all the way back up to the heart. Okay, if we're going to get blood from here all the way back up into the heart, we're going to have to pump against the force of gravity to make up this distance, right? Well, if we're lying on our back, we've destroyed the vertical distance between the feet and the heart. It means we're not going to have to work against gravity, which means that blood's going to be able to get back up to the heart more easily. Now that's all well and good unless you have heart failure. You're going to overwhelm this pump that's not working very well. You're going to overwhelm it with blood, and it's going to lead to this type of congestion that we were talking about before. So people, when they lie down, they experience shortness of breath and coughing. Okay, so that's called orthopnea. Okay, so the last thing that we worry about is what's called hemorrhage. Okay, hemorrhage is just when the capillaries or some of the blood vessels are so congested that they rupture, and it causes internal bleeding. Okay, so that's what's going on in the lungs. Let's talk about what's going on in the body. Okay, first thing, let's go back to our leg vein here. So we were saying before that with orthopnea, you have blood that's being pumped up against the force of gravity up to the heart. Okay, so what happens if you get back up in this vein, right? So this vein is here, and it normally has some fluid, right? So when you get back up, you get a lot more fluid, right? And sometimes you get so much fluid that it starts moving out into the tissues, right? And it causes swelling. So this often happens in the legs and the feet and the ankles. So this swelling is called edema. Okay, and if someone's suffering from edema, you can usually tell because their legs are swollen. Another interesting way to tell is that you can press on the tissues that are suffering from edema, and they won't come back up very quickly. It sort of looks like a memory foam mattress pad. You press it down and it comes back up really slowly. That's what edema sort of looks like when you press on it. Okay, let's also talk about what happens to the brain. Okay, so the brain has a ton of blood in it, right? I mean, assuming that you haven't been watching Khan Academy videos for 10 hours, it should have a ton of blood in it. Okay, so the blood that's in the brain gets carried back down to the heart via the jugular vein. Okay, the jugular is that vein that pops out of our neck when we're exhausted and scared and generally stressed out. Okay, so what can happen is if you're experiencing heart failure, just like we were talking about the backup in edema, you can have backup in the jugular. When that happens, the jugular becomes distended, which basically just means that it's sticking out of the skin and it's full of blood. Okay, so that's something you're going to be able to see. All right, the last thing I want to talk about are what happens to some of the organs. So we'll say this is the spleen. This is the liver. Okay, these, just like any other part of the body, have to return blood back to the heart. And when these get backed up, they'll start getting bigger. Right? They'll start swelling up. And that means you'll probably be able to feel them under the skin more easily, or in some cases even see them sort of protruding from underneath the skin.